So hello everyone out there. My name is Matt Rizzetta. I'm the founder and CEO of North 6th Agency, N6A. We are a PR and marketing firm based in New York City, although nowadays we're kind of based all over the country, given the environment. Val Leary is also on the line as well. Val's our director of demand gen, and she's going to help me cover today's session, which is all about speed, improving speed in your repertoire, such an important part of life as a startup entrepreneur. So we're really excited to give you some practical tips, advice, counsel as it relates to making you not only the smartest, but also the fastest entrepreneur you could possibly be. We want to make the next 20 minutes or so as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we'll answer them in real time, or we'll try our best to get to them at the end. Also, I'm really proud. We're giving out a free copy of my book, Embrace the Pace, the 100 Most Exhilarating Lessons Learned in a Decade of Entrepreneurship. We're offering a free complimentary copy to any entrepreneur that's joining today's session or that was a part of any of today's agenda. So feel free to reach out to Val. You see her information there, and we'll give it again to you at the end of the segment. All right, let's get started. So first off, today's session is all about speed, embrace the pace, how to be the fastest entrepreneur you can possibly be. And we're going to go over some practical tips and advice on how to do that. Before we do, I just thought it was important to talk a little bit about something we at N6A call guiding principles. And, you know, as you're getting a lot of the audience, obviously, are first-time entrepreneurs and looking to make that leap and go out on your own. So I thought it was important just to talk about how to define guiding principles that are so important to your mission and your journey as an entrepreneur. Number one is, when you go out on your own, it's super important that you define your guiding principles and you use those as a guidepost to make any decision from that point forward. So all decisions you make as an entrepreneur should really point toward a specific principle that you've defined really from day one, in terms of core values and what the guiding principles are that you want the brand to stand for. And the three that we stand for at N6A are be classy, be smart, and be fast. So, we've been pretty true to this since we got our business started about 10 years ago. All of our decisions really trace back to those three tenets. Number one, be classy. Anytime we put anything out there in the marketplace, we want it to reflect our brand in a classy way, and really show off the integrity and the polish of our brand. Number two is be smart. Anything we put out there in the market, we want to be smart. We want it to be an opportunity to show our competitive differentiation. That we can think at a level that some of our competitors can't. So that's number two. And then the third thing, which obviously is going to be the focal point of today's session, is be fast. It's super important that when you're talking about going to market today, you want to beat your competitors to the punch with speed. And speed is among the most important values that you could bring to market as a brand. And that's going to be what we talk about for the next 15 or 20 minutes. So with that in mind, let's start talking about speed. Embrace the pace. That's what we like to say at N6A. That's our MO. And when it comes to speed, how can you improve speed as a startup entrepreneur in your work repertoire? In our mind, it really comes down to three things. You want to, number one, be decisive. Number two, you want to always compress time. And then three, you want to run tests. So it's not just about talking about these things. It's actually practicing them, running tests, getting better. And we're going to talk through some practical ways to do each of those right now. Number one, in terms of being decisive, look, when you're talking about entrepreneurship, being decisive is super important. You need all of your decisions to be well-reasoned. You want to go through proper checks and balances to make sure that any decision you're making is pressure tested. You're getting proper counsel and advice and perspectives from others. But you don't want to get caught in this trap of, I like to say, paralysis by analysis, where you're overthinking anything. You really want to make sure that you can be decisive. We've seen a lot of entrepreneurs really get caught up in overthinking things. And what it does is, when you overthink things, you lose your speed to market. And sometimes you're sitting in a boardroom for too long thinking about bringing an idea to life, and a competitor then, beats you to the punch. So my coaching to you out there would be well-reasoned. Make sure you go through the proper checks and balances before you make any decisions. But once a decision is made, bring it to market. Don't overthink it. Be comfortable, with the chance that you're going to make a mistake. As long as there's proper rigor in place, bring it to market as quickly as you can. Don't overthink things too much. Be decisive. The second thing when it comes to speed, Val, if we want to just go to the next slide there. The next thing is about time compression. This, in my entrepreneurial journey, which now has lasted 10 years, I can tell you that time compression has become the entrepreneurial term or phrase that I'm probably the most obsessed with. And, as a startup entrepreneur, you want to do as good a job as possible to compress time, to turn something that took 60 minutes into a fraction of the time and improve incrementally. So how do you do that? Number one is I would encourage you to audit all of your standard processes. How are you communicating with customers? How are you communicating with employees? How are you talking to your vendors? All of those things, do an audit across the board. And chances are that there's a lot of redundancies in how you're communicating and a lot of stuff that can be cut out of those, processes in order to make you quicker, make you faster, and bring ideas to market in a more expedient way. Also, make time compression a requirement. It shouldn't be optional. You should be forcing yourself to get into a discipline and a rigor where time compression is not just an optional part of your entrepreneurial repertoire, it's a requirement. And look, I think the last bullet here is important. You never want to operate in a chaotic environment. Think about a sporting event, think about a theatrical event. Everybody should be running in lanes. There's a well-organized offense. Everybody's playing together. It shouldn't be chaotic, but it should be high octane. It should be fast-paced. So those are some practical tips I think that are important to communicate when it comes to time compression. The third thing has to do with testing yourself. And this is a real true, tried and tested way to improve your speed in your entrepreneurial repertoire. Time yourself. So look at all of the deliverables that you're bringing to life in your entrepreneurial journey. Email communications, phone communications, reports, any kind of touch points you have with vendors or employees. Just kind of look across all of those deliverables and start to time yourself. Look at something, look at a customer call that, as of today takes 60 minutes, and think about the next time, how can you make that same customer call as efficient as it was in 60 minutes, but cut 30 minutes out and do it in 30 minutes. And then after you do it in 30 minutes, ask yourself, hey, is that call now, the next time I do that call, is it possible for me to do that in 15 minutes? And now all of a sudden, what you're doing incrementally is with repetition, all of these deliverables that at one point were taking 60 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it was, you're able to get those completed in a fraction of the time. You're doing it in a way that you haven't compromised your quality. And now you've bought back a significant amount of time to apply yourself to other ways to provide value and improve the enterprise or the startup in some other way, shape, or form. So time yourself. I've been timing myself on deliverables for the past 10 years, and I still have a long way to go in my journey. But, we were doing customer calls that used to take 90 minutes. Now those same customer calls take 30 minutes, and we accomplished the same outputs we were in a fraction of the time. Staff meetings that used to take an hour, now they take 15 minutes. And this all happened because we timed ourselves, and we got better incrementally as we moved along the way. So those are three kind of practical ways I think you want to go about improving your speed repertoire. The next thing we wanted to talk about is how you can differentiate yourself, again, with speed in mind, to scale. And obviously a lot of the audience here is first-time entrepreneurs thinking about finally making that jump. The next step in your entrepreneurial journey, once you get past, we call them, your survival days, are going to be to scale. And, you're going to want to build an enterprise of significance when it comes to scale. So here are just three lessons that, I've learned in my journey that have really helped differentiate and improve our ability to scale. Number one is kind of keep it simple, stupid, like they say. Number two is promise and deliver. And number three is develop championship habits. And we're going to talk over the next couple of slides about what these mean exactly. So let's start with the first one, keep it simple. A lot of the mistakes I think I've made as an entrepreneur over the past 10 years have been when I've tended to overcomplicate things. And, I think a lot of times entrepreneurs get in their own heads and they convince themselves that processes need to be more complicated than they really should be. I would try to avoid that trap as you're starting your entrepreneurial journey. I think the most significant and successful outcomes I've had over the past 10 years have had to do when I've simplified things. Simplicity drives scale, simplicity in every way, shape, or form, simplicity in how you're communicating with your peers and your customers and your employees, simplicity in how you're delivering reports, simplicity in how you're analyzing data. Just keep it clean, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. Try to run in lanes and just be as streamlined as you possibly could be across every function and every output. The second thing, look, I want to talk out there to everyone who is, has some kind of sales related responsibility in your startup. And especially if you're first-time startup entrepreneurs, chances are you're wearing a lot of hats. I'm sure one of them is going to be sales and marketing. And I'm sure, how many times have you heard the phrase, never overpromise and underdeliver, which is 100% true. Obviously, you never want to overpromise. A lot of the mistakes I've made with customers have been when I've, especially in my younger days, when I've overpromised things. And then you've heard you should always underpromise and overdeliver. And I can just tell you in my entrepreneurial journey, that also is not necessarily the best approach. I think that underpromising and overdelivering is inherently dishonest and as dishonest as overpromising and underdelivering. So my advice to you is and it's a pretty novel concept. You probably haven't heard this too much, but just promise and deliver. And, say what you think you can deliver, and then ultimately back it up with your actions and your product and tell the customer, look, we believe in our product. This is what we believe we can deliver, and then deliver that. And I think that, at least in my experience working with customers and scaling our business, the most success we've ever had has been when we've just told customers what we believe we can do. We stand by our product, and then our service team goes up there and we back it up with our results. And I think that that's an important concept, and I think that oftentimes gets overlooked in the entrepreneurial journey where people tell you to underpromise and overdeliver. I think that's sort of inherently dishonest. I think you should just tell customers you believe in your product, this is what you believe you can deliver, and then ultimately back it up with the product itself. Last but not least, develop championship habits. And this is outlined in my book, which again, after this session, feel free to reach out to Val. We'll get you guys a complimentary copy if you'd like. It has 100 of the most valuable lessons I've learned, mostly through mistakes, by the way, over the past 10 years. And there's something that I have in the book called championship habits. And I've observed a lot of common habits and traits in the most successful people in my network, that we've surrounded ourselves with. And we're going to share on this next slide with you 3 of those habits. There's about 10 common championship habits. These are 3 of them. Number 1, startup entrepreneurs who support their arguments with analytics always are super successful. So when you're talking about how to communicate with your customers, how to communicate with employees, to the extent that you can back up your insights with data, support it with data so that it's objective, it becomes you have an indefensible, or impenetrable wall. People can't poke holes because you've backed up your product, you've backed up your arguments with data. So anybody who supports arguments with data in their entrepreneurial journey, at least in my experience, has always had a competitive advantage and has had successful, or I call them championship traits. Number 2, if you could choose between, obviously you're going to have to be a great talker if you're an entrepreneur, but if you could be a better listener than you are a talker, that's a championship habit. There's so many entrepreneurs out there, and frankly, a lot of them are a dime a dozen who can talk a good game. The rare few who can listen, absorb, and then apply after they've listened have been the most successful ones. And I can just tell you the most successful startup entrepreneurs, at least in my network, are the ones who listen first, apply, and then talk second, as opposed to talking first and then listening after the fact. And last but not least, be a data diva. I like to, the only way that you're going to get better as an entrepreneur, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're thinking about making the leap into startup land and this, uncharted waters, the only way you're going to get better is to sort of study your data. And if you have 10 customer pitches in the first month of your business and you closed 5 of them, study the 5 that you didn't close and why didn't you close those 5. And I'm sure that as you study that data, there's going to be commonalities, common threads, common reasons why you didn't close those 5 customers. Study those trends closely and then apply them. So the next time, you pitch 10 customers, maybe your close rate now is 7 out of 10 because you learned. And then 7 out of 10 becomes 8 out of 10, becomes 9 out of 10. And before you know it, incrementally, you're a well-oiled machine and you're closing business and you're doing a great job. Incrementally, you're improving more than you ever were before. And all of that's happening because you've disciplined yourself to study the data, study the trends, study the analytics, get better, have a rigor in place where data is front and center in your work repertoire. And last but not least, I just wanted to spend a minute or two talking about your USP, your unique selling proposition. Ultimately, as you go out there into startup land, you really need to think about what's going to make you different. And obviously speed, in my entrepreneurial journey with Embrace the Pace at N6A, speed has really been one of our differentiators. We go to market with a speed first approach. Our business, we're a PR and marketing services provider. A lot of our competing providers work off of these billable hours, and they kind of almost treat speed as if it's a penalty where they make less money if they work faster. So we've kind of flipped that on its head, and we like to make speed a premium. And speed is our differentiator. We have other differentiators too, but speed is really, when it comes to our marketing material, when it comes to our external positioning, when it comes to how we train our employees, everything always is speed first, speed. And anyway, I'm not suggesting that speed should necessarily be your differentiator. My point is just that whenever you think about what's going to differentiate you on your entrepreneurial journey, what's going to differentiate you as a startup entrepreneur, and what's going to differentiate your product, stay true to that. And, make sure that, that differentiator is positioned properly externally. You live and breathe those principles when it comes to how you're training your staff. And whatever it is, it could be, ours is speed, yours could be something else. Just be true to that USP, whatever it is, and define it early in your journey, and then always refine it as you go along, so that that's a constant work in progress as your journey continues to take shape. And of course, do it quickly.